Welcome back to the GMP and Quality Fundamentals series, and this is Lecture 23. This is the final lecture of Level 2. And it covers one of the most important practical skills in quality control: how to investigate a laboratory failure properly. Most quality professionals know how to spot an OOS result. Far fewer know how to investigate one in a way that satisfies regulatory requirements, holds up under inspection scrutiny, and actually leads to a real corrective action. That is what this lecture teaches you. The complete laboratory investigation process, from the moment an anomalous result appears to the moment the investigation report is closed. Here is what we will cover today. Number 1. You will understand the 4 types of results that trigger a laboratory investigation and what each requires. Number 2. You will master the Phase 1 and Phase 2 OOS investigation structure. What each phase covers, when to move between them, and what decisions must be documented. Number 3. You will learn the complete 8-step investigation workflow from quarantine to closed report. Number 4. You will understand the most critical and most misunderstood element of any OOS investigation: when you can and cannot invalidate an OOS result. Number 5. You will know exactly what inspectors look for in investigation files, and what the most common investigation failures are. Not every unexpected result is the same, and not every investigation follows the same path. Let me walk you through the 4 main triggers for a laboratory investigation. The first and most serious is an out-of-specification result, or OOS. This is a result that falls outside the approved specification limit for release testing. FDA 21 CFR 211.192 and EU GMP both require a full documented investigation. No batch can be released or rejected until that investigation is complete and a QA-approved conclusion has been reached. The second trigger is an out-of-trend result, or OOT. An OOT result is one that falls within specification but outside the expected statistical variation based on historical data. This is particularly important in stability testing. An OOT result signals a potential process drift before it becomes an OOS. It is addressed in ICH Q10 and in stability testing guidelines. The investigation is less intensive than for OOS, but it must be documented and risk assessed. The third trigger is an atypical or anomalous result. This is a result that appears unusual or inconsistent even if it falls within specification. An unexpected impurity peak that was not seen in previous batches. A chromatographic profile that looks different from historical patterns. A color that is significantly darker than usual. These observations raise doubt. And in GMP, any result that raises doubt must be investigated. The fourth trigger is a system suitability failure. If the analytical sequence fails system suitability before any sample is injected, the entire run is invalid. No sample results from that run can be reported. An investigation must identify what caused the SST failure, correct it, and document it before the sequence is repeated. For OOS results, the regulatory framework requires a 2-phase investigation structure. This is defined in the FDA's 2006 guidance on investigating OOS results and is expected by EMA as well. Phase 1 is the laboratory investigation. The key principle of Phase 1 is that it examines only the laboratory and the analytical process. You do not retest the retained sample yet. You do not review the batch record yet. You look only at what happened in the laboratory during this specific analytical run. The Phase 1 checklist includes reviewing the raw data file for anomalies, checking system suitability results from that run, reviewing the sample preparation records including dilutions, weights, and volumes, verifying that all reagents and reference standards were within their valid use dates, confirming that the instrument was within its calibration period, interviewing the analyst about anything unusual, and verifying that the analyst held current training on this method. If Phase 1 identifies a confirmed, specific laboratory error, that error can be the basis for invalidating the OOS result and performing a retest. The invalidation must be documented with the specific evidence before the retest is conducted. If Phase 1 finds no laboratory error, the investigation escalates to Phase 2. Phase 2 is the manufacturing and product investigation. This is initiated only when Phase 1 is fully complete and documented with no assignable cause found. Phase 2 involves retesting the retained sample from the original batch, reviewing the batch record, reviewing raw material COAs and incoming inspection records, assessing whether other batches made from the same materials or on the same line are potentially affected, and evaluating environmental or contamination factors. If Phase 2 confirms a product failure, the batch is rejected. Other potentially affected batches are assessed. Regulatory notification may be required depending on the product and the jurisdiction. The critical rule: Phase 2 cannot begin before Phase 1 is complete. Inspectors check the dates. If the batch record review started on the same day as the OOS was identified, before any Phase 1 documentation was completed, that is a finding. Let me now walk you through the complete 8-step investigation workflow. Step 1. Quarantine immediately. The moment an OOS result is identified, quarantine the batch. No further processing. No shipping. No release. Document the quarantine decision with the time and date and the name of the person who made the decision. Step 2. Open an investigation record. Create a formal investigation record in your quality system. Assign a unique investigation number. Record the initial result, the specification limit, the analyst name, the date of the test, and the date the investigation was opened. Step 3. Conduct Phase 1. Follow the Phase 1 checklist systematically. Review every item. Document every finding even if it is negative. A Phase 1 report that says we reviewed X and found no anomaly is just as important as one that identifies an error. The documentation must show that the check was actually performed. Step 4. The Phase 1 decision point. QA reviews the Phase 1 findings. This is a formal, documented decision. Either a confirmed laboratory error was identified, in which case the QA approves invalidation with the specific scientific justification and authorizes a retest, or no laboratory error was found, in which case QA escalates to Phase 2. This decision must be signed and dated by QA. It cannot be made unilaterally by the analyst. Step 5. Phase 2 product investigation. Retest the retained sample. Review the batch record. Extend the investigation scope as needed. Document all findings systematically. Step 6. Root cause determination. Apply your root cause analysis tools, the 5Y method or the fishbone diagram, to identify the assignable cause. The investigation must reach a defined conclusion. The root cause of unknown with no further explanation is not acceptable in a GMP investigation. If the root cause genuinely cannot be determined after a thorough investigation, that must be stated explicitly with documentation of every avenue explored. Step 7. CAPA and batch disposition. Based on the investigation conclusion, define corrective and preventive actions. Make the formal batch disposition decision. Release, reject, reprocess, or additional testing. QA must authorize all dispositions with documented scientific rationale. Step 8. Close the investigation report. Write the complete report covering all phases, findings, root cause, disposition, and CAPA. QA reviews and approves. File it with the batch record. Set CAPA implementation deadlines and track them to closure. Let me spend specific time on invalidation, because this is the most misunderstood and most abused area in laboratory GMP. An OOS result can only be invalidated when a specific, documented laboratory error is identified in Phase 1 with contemporaneous evidence. Invalidation is a tightly controlled regulatory decision, not a tool for avoiding failing batch dispositions. Valid grounds for invalidation are specific and narrow. A confirmed transcription error where the result was recorded incorrectly but the actual raw data is correct and supports a different value. A confirmed sample preparation error such as a wrong dilution factor, where the error is documented with contemporaneous evidence from the analyst's notes at the time. A confirmed instrument malfunction supported by equipment alarm logs or maintenance records showing a failure during that specific run. A confirmed reagent failure where a quality control sample in the same run also failed, confirming the reagent was defective. Or a confirmed analyst procedural error documented in their contemporaneous bench notes at the time of the event. Now let me be equally clear about what is never acceptable as grounds for invalidation: retesting until you get a passing result, and then choosing to invalidate the original OOS. This is one of the most serious data integrity violations in pharmaceutical quality. Invalidating because the analyst had a feeling something went wrong without any documented evidence. Invalidating because the result seems inconsistent with what manufacturing expected. Retroactively assigning a reason for invalidation after seeing that the retest passed. The assignable cause must be identified and documented before the decision to retest is made, not after. If you cannot identify a specific, documented laboratory error in Phase 1, you cannot invalidate the OOS result. Period. The investigation report is a regulatory document that must stand on its own. An FDA inspector who was not present at any stage of the investigation should be able to read your report and understand exactly what happened, what was found, what conclusion was reached, and why. The report has 8 defined sections. Section 1 is the investigation header. Unique investigation number, product name and batch number, specification limit, actual result, date of result, analyst name, and date the investigation was opened. Section 2 is the description of the event. What test was performed? What result was expected? What result was obtained? This must be objective and factual. No interpretation at this stage. Section 3 is the Phase 1 findings. Document every check from the Phase 1 checklist. For each check, state what was examined, what was found, and whether it represents a potential assignable cause. Include references to the raw data, equipment logs, and training records reviewed. Section 4 is the Phase 2 findings if Phase 2 was conducted. Retain sample retest results. Batch record review findings. Manufacturing investigation outcomes. Section 5 is the root cause. State the identified root cause with specific evidence. If the root cause cannot be determined, state this explicitly and justify why it could not be established after thorough investigation. Section 6 is batch disposition. State the decision and provide the scientific rationale. Reference the QA approval. Section 7 is the CAPA. If a corrective or preventive action is required, reference the CAPA number, the owner, and the deadline. Section 8 is QA approval and closeout. The name, title, signature, and date of the QA reviewer who approved the investigation conclusion, and the formal close date. There is no single universally mandated timeline for OOS investigations. But FDA guidance and industry best practice establish clear expectations that inspectors hold you to. On day 0, when the OOS result is identified, the batch is quarantined and the investigation is opened. Phase 1 should be completed within 5 business days. This gives enough time to review all relevant records thoroughly but prevents the investigation from drifting. If Phase 2 is needed, it should be initiated within days of Phase 1 completion, and the entire Phase 2 investigation should conclude within 20 business days of the original OOS identification. The full investigation report, including root cause, disposition, and CAPA, should be completed and QA approved within 30 business days. CAPA implementation follows the timelines defined in the investigation and is tracked through your quality management system. An investigation that is opened and then sits untouched for 3 weeks before being picked up again is a finding. There must be documented progress at regular intervals throughout the investigation. If the investigation is complex and requires extended time, the reason for the extension must be documented and QA must formally approve the extended timeline. Let me now tell you exactly what inspectors look for when they pull an OOS investigation file, because these are the checks that distinguish a professional investigation from a paper exercise. First, was Phase 1 completed before Phase 2 was initiated? Inspectors check the dates on every document. If the batch record review occurred before the Phase 1 documentation was complete, that is a process failure regardless of the outcome. Second, was the investigation completed in a timely manner? They will count the days. An investigation that is still open after 45 days without a documented extension approval is a finding. Third, were all relevant records reviewed and specifically referenced? Raw data file, system suitability records, sample preparation notes, reagent and standard logs, instrument calibration records, analyst training records. All of these must be referenced with specific document identifiers in the Phase 1 report. Fourth, was the root cause clearly identified or, if not determinable, was that explicitly justified? Vague conclusions like analyst error or human error without further explanation of the specific error and how it was confirmed are not acceptable. Fifth, if an OOS was invalidated, was the invalidation scientifically justified with contemporaneous evidence? This is the question inspectors ask most carefully. Was the assignable cause identified before the retest was conducted? Or does the timeline suggest that the retest was performed first and the reason was invented afterwards? Sixth, were impacted batches assessed? When an OOS is confirmed in Phase 2, inspectors check whether other batches produced under the same conditions were evaluated. Failure to extend the investigation scope when the product quality concern is confirmed is a major finding. Let me finish with the most common investigation failures I see in practice. The first and most serious is retesting without a Phase 1 investigation. An analyst gets an OOS result. Without reviewing the raw data or checking the system suitability, they repeat the test. The second result passes. They report the passing result and close the event without an investigation. This is a data integrity violation. The OOS result must be investigated before any retest result can be used to make a disposition decision. The second failure is using statistical averaging to pass a failing result. If one result is OOS and two retests pass, averaging all three to get a passing mean is never acceptable unless a specific averaging approach is defined in the approved method and validated. Each individual result must stand on its own against the specification. The third failure is closing with an unknown root cause and no follow-up. If the investigation genuinely cannot determine the root cause after an exhaustive investigation, that conclusion is acceptable. But it must be explicitly stated, the reasons documented, and a CAPA raised for enhanced monitoring or process review. The fourth failure is not assessing the impact on other batches. A confirmed OOS in Phase 2 is not isolated to that batch. Every batch made from the same materials, on the same equipment, and by the same process during the same period must be risk assessed. This is a documented regulatory obligation. The fifth failure is writing the investigation report weeks after the investigation was conducted. The report must be written contemporaneously with the investigation. Writing a detailed Phase 1 report 2 months after the investigation occurred, based on notes that may no longer be complete or accurate, raises serious data integrity concerns. Let us bring Level 2 to a close with the key takeaways from this final lecture. Number 1. 4 triggers for laboratory investigations: OOS results, OOT results, atypical results, and system suitability failures. Each requires a different investigation type and depth. Number 2. OOS investigations have 2 phases. Phase 1 examines only the laboratory. Phase 2 examines the product and manufacturing process. Phase 2 cannot begin before Phase 1 is complete and documented. Number 3. Invalidation is tightly controlled. An OOS result can only be invalidated when a specific, documented laboratory error is identified with contemporaneous evidence. Retesting until passing and then invalidating the OOS is a critical data integrity violation. Number 4. The investigation report has 8 defined sections. It must be written contemporaneously. It must reach a specific conclusion. Unknown root cause requires documented justification and a monitoring CAPA. Number 5. Phase 1 within 5 days. Phase 2 within 20 days. Full report within 30 days. Prolonged investigations with no documented progress are inspection findings. Number 6. Inspectors check whether Phase 1 preceded Phase 2, whether invalidations are scientifically justified with contemporaneous evidence, and whether impacted batches were assessed. These are the most commonly cited OOS investigation deficiencies globally. That is Lecture 23 complete. And with that, Level 2 is complete. Over the past 11 lectures of Level 2, you have covered risk-based thinking, method validation and verification, method lifecycle management, quality KPIs, internal audits, regulatory inspections, technical agreements with suppliers, COA review and approval, supplier qualification and auditing, manufacturing quality metrics, and laboratory investigation best practices. That is the complete foundation of advanced GMP operations. Well done for making it this far. Now we begin Level 3, Microbiology Fundamentals. And this is where the series moves into the field that is directly relevant to your own professional work. Lecture 24 is titled Microbiology in GMP and Food Safety, Why It Matters. This lecture opens Level 3 and sets the context for everything that follows. Why microbiology is critical in regulated industries, what the consequences of microbiological failures are, how food and pharmaceutical microbiology differ, and where you as a microbiologist fit within the quality system. If this lecture or any lecture in this series has helped you, please give it a like. Subscribe for new lectures every week. And drop your questions in the comments. I read every single one and I reply. I will see you in Lecture 24. Level 3 begins.